The valet didn't even look up. That was the first thing. Not the uniform, not the sign on the door, not the woman at the front desk who straightened her spine the moment Ellison Webb walked through the entrance of the Hargrove Grand. It was the valet, young man, maybe 22, gold-button jacket, clipboard, who looked straight through Ellison Webb like he was a smudge on the glass door he'd just pushed open. Ellison Webb was 61 years old. He had on a Carhartt jacket he'd owned for 9 years, the kind that had paint on the left cuff from a weekend project he'd never quite finished. His boots were clean but old. His cap said nothing, no logo, no team, just dark blue cotton that had faded to the color of a late afternoon sky. He carried a manila envelope under one arm and nothing else. He stood in the lobby of the Hargrove Grand Hotel in downtown Nashville and looked around slowly, the way a man looks at something he already knows but hasn't seen in a while. The lobby smelled like cedar and money. Fresh flowers on the concierge desk, white lilies, maybe 40 stems. Marble floor that caught the light from a chandelier the size of a small car. 3 elevators with brass doors. A restaurant entrance to the left, soft jazz leaking out from somewhere behind the host stand. The Hargrove Grand had 112 rooms, a rooftop bar, a steakhouse that had held a James Beard nomination for 6 consecutive years, and a spa that was booked out for the next 3 months. Ellison Webb knew all of this because he had just signed the paperwork to buy it, but the valet didn't know that. The woman at the front desk didn't know that. And Mitchell Crane, the hotel's general manager, a man who had run the Hargrove Grand for 11 years with the energy of someone who believed the hotel was his because no one had told him otherwise. Mitchell Crane absolutely did not know that, which was exactly how Ellison Webb wanted it. He had told his attorney, Sandra Park, that he wanted one day before any announcement. Just one. Sandra had raised an eyebrow over her reading glasses and said, "Ellison, that's irregular." He'd said, "I know." She'd said, "The staff won't know how to address you." He'd said, "Good." What he hadn't told Sandra, what he hadn't told anyone, was that he'd been watching the Hargrove Grand for 2 years. Not just the financials, not just the occupancy rates and the TripAdvisor metrics and the health inspection records. He'd been watching the way it treated people. He'd sent his cousin in, a woman named Gloria, who could dress down better than anyone he knew, and Gloria had come back with stories that sat in Ellison Webb's chest for weeks. A couple from Memphis turned away from a Saturday dinner reservation because the host couldn't find them in the system, though they had the confirmation email on their phone. A young man asked to leave the rooftop bar because he was making other guests uncomfortable, which was a sentence that required no translation. An older black woman sitting in the lobby waiting for her daughter told a staff member she was a guest. She had a room key in her hand and was still asked to move to a less central seating area. Ellison Webb had built 3 hotels from scratch. He'd started in Knoxville in 1994 with a 40-room property near the university, scraped together from an SBA loan and 10 years of savings from his father's contracting business. He'd sold that hotel in 2003 at a profit that made his accountant laugh out loud. He'd built again in Memphis, then in Louisville, then a boutique property in Birmingham that had won a regional design award. The Hargrove Grand was the first property he was acquiring rather than building. The first time he was walking into something someone else had made. He wanted to know what he was walking into, not the version that appeared in the acquisition documents, the version that existed on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in March. So that's what he did. Ellison Webb walked past the valet without a word and crossed the lobby toward the restaurant entrance. The host stand was unmanned. He waited. Behind the glass partition, he could see white tablecloths and low lighting and maybe 8 tables occupied out of 30. Lunch service winding down. A young woman appeared from somewhere to the left, moving quickly, tucking a notepad into her apron. She had a small gold name tag that said Renata. "Do you have a reservation?" Renata asked. "I don't," Ellison Webb said. She looked at her book. "We're pretty full for." She looked up at him. She looked at the jacket. She looked at the cap. "We do have a few tables available. Are you dining alone?" "Just me." She picked up a menu and led him toward the back of the restaurant. Not the worst table. There was one near the kitchen door that he suspected was reserved for situations like this, but not a window table either. A two-top against the interior wall, next to a pillar, the table slightly unsteady when he put his elbow on it. Ellison Webb sat down and opened the menu and said nothing. The jazz was coming from a small speaker near the bar. Someone had chosen the wrong playlist. up-tempo stuff that didn't match the room's intention. He made a mental note. He ordered the pan-seared trout and a sparkling water. Renata smiled when she took the order and seemed to relax slightly, the way service people sometimes do when they've decided you're probably fine after all. The food was good. He'd known it would be. The Hargrove Grand's kitchen was one of the main reasons he'd wanted the property. Chef somebody or other who'd trained in Lyon and come back to Nashville and made the steakhouse into something that deserved its reputation. The trout came with a celery root puree and pickled mustard greens that were sharper than he'd expected and better for it. He was finishing the last of his water when Mitchell Crane walked through the restaurant. Ellison Webb recognized him from the background materials. 53 years old, gray at the temples, a suit that fit well, and shoes that were recently shined. Mitchell Crane had the bearing of a man who had been the most important person in a room for so long that he'd forgotten to check whether that was still true. Crane was moving through the restaurant the way a ship moves through water. Not fast, but with the assumption that everything would get out of the way. He paused at a table near the window, said something to the couple there that made them laugh, touched the back of a chair as he passed it. He did a slow loop of the room. Then his eyes landed on Ellison Webb. It wasn't a long look, 2 seconds, maybe 3. But something shifted in Crane's posture in those 2 seconds. His chin came up a fraction. His pace changed. He walked over. "Afternoon," Crane said. He didn't extend a hand. "Afternoon," Ellison Webb said. "Good meal?" "Very good." Trout was excellent. Crane nodded, but the nod had nothing in it. His eyes moved to the manila envelope Ellison Webb had set on the empty chair. Then back up. "You waiting for someone?" "No. Just passing through Nashville or—" "I'm here on business," Ellison Webb said. Crane's mouth moved into something adjacent to a smile. "What kind of business?" And there it was. That question. The one that wasn't really a question. The one that meant, "You don't look like you belong here, and I'd like to understand why you haven't left yet." Ellison Webb had heard that question, or some version of it, more times than he could count. In boardrooms and bank offices and hotel lobbies and country clubs and restaurants that smelled like cedar and money. He had learned over 40 years that there were roughly 2 ways to answer it. You could produce your credentials immediately, which handed control of the room to the person asking, or you could simply decline to. "Real estate," Ellison Webb said. Crane waited for more. More did not come. "Well," Crane straightened. "Enjoy the rest of your afternoon." He walked away. He did not look back. Ellison Webb asked Renata for the check. The check came to $41 and some change. He put down $60 in cash, a $50 and 2 5s, and told Renata to keep it. She thanked him with the kind of warmth that suggested she wasn't thanked that way very often. He picked up his envelope and stood and put on his jacket and was walking toward the restaurant exit when he heard Crane's voice behind him. Loud enough to carry, not loud enough to be obvious. "Renata, which table did you seat him at?" And Renata's voice quieter. "Table 14, Mr. Crane." "Not 11? A pause. "He seemed fine. Next time," Crane said, and his voice dropped, "we use better judgment about seating." Ellison Webb kept walking. He did not stop. He did not turn around. He pushed through the glass door and crossed the lobby and walked out through the main entrance into the Nashville afternoon, where the valet was still not looking up. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The sun was out. Pigeons on the concrete lip of the fountain across the street. A taxi pulling away from the curb. He breathed in once, slowly. Then he took out his phone and called Sandra Park. "I'm ready to make the announcement," he said. Sandra wanted to do it formally. A letter to the staff, an all-hands meeting, the usual choreography of a hotel acquisition. Ellison Webb agreed to the letter. He asked her to send it that evening to arrive in inboxes by 6 a.m. the following morning. He did not go back to the hotel that night. He had a suite at a smaller property 2 blocks away, a place he'd stayed at before, run by a family from Georgia who knew how to make a bed tight and a breakfast hot. He ate dinner at a diner on Charlotte Avenue and called his son in Atlanta and talked for an hour about nothing important. He slept well. At 9 the following morning, Ellison Webb walked back into the Hargrove Grand. Same jacket, same boots, same cap. The lobby was different in the morning, brighter, more movement, a group checking out at the front desk with luggage stacked near the door. The valet this morning was a different young man, older than yesterday's, who held the door open and said, "Good morning, sir," with the kind of professional ease that Ellison Webb made a note of. He walked to the front desk. There was a woman behind it named Cheryl, older, mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain, who looked up and said, "Good morning, checking in?" "No," Ellison Webb said. "I'm here to see Mitchell Crane." Cheryl's expression changed almost immediately, not dramatically, but something behind her eyes shifted. "Can I ask your name?" "Ellison Webb." And there it was, the recognition. The email had gone out. Cheryl's hand moved toward the phone beneath the counter, and she said, very carefully, "Mr. Webb, of course. Let me let him know you're here." Ellison Webb stepped back from the desk and stood in the center of the lobby and waited. It took 6 minutes. Mitchell Crane came down the stairs rather than the elevator, which suggested someone had told him to hurry. He had on a different suit than yesterday. Charcoal gray today, and he was moving with a different energy than the one that had carried him through the restaurant the afternoon before. That ship-through-water confidence had been replaced with something faster and less certain. He saw Ellison Webb and stopped for a half-second at the bottom of the stairs. Then he came forward with his hand out. "Mr. Webb," Mitchell Crane said. "Mitchell Crane, it's a pleasure." Ellison Webb looked at the hand. Then he shook it. "Mr. Crane, we received the communication this morning, of course, and I want to say on behalf of the entire staff, walk with me," Ellison Webb said. Crane walked with him. They went through the lobby and into the restaurant, which was set for breakfast service, white tablecloths still pressed flat, coffee service laid out on the side bar. Empty at this hour except for a server resetting salt seltzers at the far end. Ellison Webb pulled out a chair at table 14. The same table he'd sat at yesterday, the one against the pillar, the one with the unsteady leg, and sat down. He set the manila envelope on the table. Crane took the chair across from him, the one that had held the envelope the day before. "I had lunch here yesterday," Ellison Webb said. Mitchell Crane went very still. "The trot was excellent," Ellison Webb continued. "The celery root was a nice touch." "Chef, what's the name?" "Beaumont. Derek Beaumont. Chef Beaumont is talented. I want to make sure he stays." Ellison Webb paused. "The table I was given was this one, against the pillar. The leg wobbles." He pressed down on the table edge gently to demonstrate. It rocked slightly. "I also noticed the playlist in here is wrong. The tempo doesn't match the room." Crane said nothing. "I noticed a few other things," Ellison Webb said, "but we can get to those." He opened the manila envelope and took out a single sheet. Not the full acquisition documents, just a summary page, with the property name at the top, and his company's name below it, and his signature at the bottom, and he laid it on the table between them. "You've seen the communication," Ellison Webb said. "You know what this is." Crane looked at the paper, then he looked up. "Mr. Webb, I want to be completely transparent. Yesterday, I didn't know. I know you didn't know," Ellison Webb said. "That was the point." Crane's jaw tightened slightly. "What I want to understand," Ellison Webb said, keeping his voice even, "is whether what I saw yesterday was an unusual day or a usual one." "I don't. Your manager on duty instructed your host to seat guests of a certain appearance at table 14 or the equivalent. She used the phrase better judgment about seating. I heard that." He let that sit for a moment. "Is that standard practice here?" The server at the far end of the restaurant had stopped resetting the salt cellars. They were pretending not to listen. They were listening. Crane leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Webb, I can assure you that the Hargrove Grand—" "I've been in hospitality for 37 years, Ellison Webb said. "I built my first property in Knoxville when I was 24 years old. I have owned and operated 7 hotels. I know what standard practice looks like, and I know what people say when they're describing standard practice without meaning to." He picked up the summary sheet and tapped it against the table edge once, lightly, to straighten it. "I'm not asking you to confess to something. I'm asking you to tell me the truth about what I walked into yesterday." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. The kind that presses down on the person who needs to fill it. Crane filled it. Not all the way, not an honest accounting, not the version Ellison Webb suspected was real, but enough. He said that the restaurant had been struggling with what he called guest mix challenges. He said that certain staff had taken it upon themselves to manage the dining room environment. He said it with the careful language of someone who had learned to describe a thing without naming it, and Ellison Webb listened to all of it and nodded slowly and said nothing until Crane was done. "Thank you," Ellison Webb said. Crane looked uncertain about whether he should be relieved. "I'm going to need your full operations report by Friday," Ellison Webb said. HR documentation, incident logs, guest complaint records for the last 2 years, all of it. He stood. He picked up the envelope. I'll be on property for the rest of this week. My team arrives Thursday. Crane stood too. Of course. Whatever you need. There's one more thing. Ellison Webb buttoned the lower button of his jacket. The woman who hosted me yesterday, Renata. Crane's expression shifted again, calculating this time. She was kind, Ellison Webb said simply. I noticed that. Make sure she knows I did. He walked toward the restaurant exit. Behind him, he heard the server at the far end of the room set down a salt cellar very carefully, as though they were trying not to make a sound. The rest of the week was work, the ordinary, unglamorous work of taking something over. Spreadsheets and staff rosters, and a facilities walk that revealed a boiler room situation that was going to cost more than the acquisition documents had suggested. His team arrived Thursday as promised. A woman named Diana, who had managed 2 of his Louisville properties and had the energy of someone who ran on 4 hours of sleep and absolute certainty. A man named Patrick, who did operations with the quiet precision of a watchmaker. A young analyst fresh from Cornell named Tessa, who took notes faster than anyone Ellison Webb had ever seen. They met with department heads one at a time: front desk, housekeeping, F&B, maintenance, spa. The meetings were professional and measured, and in most of them Ellison Webb sat to the side and let Diana and Patrick ask the questions, which confused some of the department heads, who kept directing their answers toward whoever was wearing the most expensive clothes, which was never Ellison Webb. He noticed that too, made his notes. On Friday morning, Ellison Webb was in the business center off the lobby, a small room with a printer, a table, and a window that looked out at the side alley, going through the operations report Crane had delivered at 8 a.m., which was thorough and careful and had the specific texture of a document written by someone who knows they're being evaluated. He heard the voices before he saw what was happening. The business center door was open. The lobby outside was at its Friday bustle, checkout time approaching, luggage carts moving, the front desk handling 3 guests at once. And somewhere in the middle of that, there was a voice, not loud but not quiet either, that had the particular quality of a voice accustomed to getting what it wanted before anyone pushed back. Ellison Webb got up. In the lobby, near the concierge desk, there was a man in a suit who was talking to a young staff member, a kid, maybe 19. With a name tag Ellison Webb couldn't read from here, in a way that was not conversation. The suited man had something in his hand. His posture said, "You have made an error, and the error is inconveniencing me, and your job is to apologize until I feel better." The kid behind the desk had the expression Ellison Webb had seen 100 times. The careful, professional neutral that service workers wear when they can't say what they're actually thinking. His name tag, close enough now to read, said Jerome. Told the reservation line specifically. 4 nights, executive suite, and whoever booked this put me in a standard room, which is not what Mr. Dawson. Jerome said carefully, I can absolutely look into that for you. If you'll give me just a moment. I've been standing here for 10 minutes, Dawson said. This is not a moment situation. Jerome's hands were on the keyboard. His face was controlled, but his jaw was tight in the way that meant he'd been standing there absorbing this for longer than 10 minutes, and the 10-minute number was a generous revision. Ellison Webb walked over. He stood slightly to the side of Jerome's counter, not in front of it, not behind it, but in the zone that was neither clearly staff territory nor guest territory. He put his hands in the pockets of his Carhartt jacket. He said, pleasant morning. Dawson looked at him, looked at the jacket, looked back at Jerome. Who's this? Ellison Webb, Ellison Webb said. I own the hotel. The lobby did not go quiet. It was too busy for that. But the immediate vicinity did something that felt like going quiet. The concierge at the next desk suddenly found something to study on her monitor. The luggage cart passing behind them seemed to slow. Dawson said, you own, and then stopped. Jerome, Ellison Webb said, not looking away from Dawson, what's the room situation? Jerome's voice was admirably steady. Mr. Dawson has a reservation for an executive suite. It looks like there may have been an entry error on the booking side. We have one executive suite that's checking out this morning. Housekeeping estimates clean by 11. Can we get Mr. Dawson's luggage held and offer him breakfast in the meantime? Ellison Webb said. Absolutely, Jerome said. Ellison Webb looked at Dawson. That work for you? Dawson had the expression of a man recalibrating rapidly. Yes, that works. Good. Ellison Webb nodded once. He looked at Jerome. "Thank you, Jerome." He turned and walked back toward the business center. Behind him, he heard Dawson say something to Jerome in a lower register than before. He didn't hear Jerome's response. But a moment later, the lobby resumed its normal Friday rhythm, and the tension that had been sitting in the air around that concierge desk dissolved like something the ventilation system had simply carried away. Ellison Webb sat back down in front of the operations report. He turned to the guest complaint records. He read for an hour. Then he took out his phone and called Sandra Park. "I'm going to need to make some staffing changes," he said. "How significant?" Sandra said. "Upper management level, maybe broader." Sandra was quiet for a moment. "Mitchell Crane? Yes. Others? I'll have a list by end of day." Sandra made a note-taking sound. "Transition timeline? 30 days, Ellison Webb said. "I want it clean. Severance handled fairly, references where it's warranted. I don't want anyone blindsided." He paused. "Except, there's a server in the restaurant, Renata, and a young man at the front desk named Jerome. I want them flagged for accelerated development. Whatever the next step is for each of them, I want to make sure they have the support to get there." "Got it," Sandra said. "Anything else?" Ellison Webb looked out the window at the side alley. A delivery truck was backing in, and the driver was hanging out the window at an angle that looked uncomfortable but apparently worked. Sun was hitting the brick wall of the building across the alley and making it orange. "The boiler room," he said. "We need to talk about the boiler room." Sandra laughed. "I saw that in the inspection notes. I did warn you." "You did," he said. "The announcement went out to full staff on Monday morning." Not a long letter. Ellison Webb had never believed in long letters. A few paragraphs. His name, his background, the name of the company, his expectations in plain language. The final sentence said, "The Hargrove Grand exists to serve every guest who walks through its doors with the same excellence and dignity. That is not an aspiration. It is a requirement." He was in the lobby when the announcement went out, sitting in one of the armchairs near the window with a cup of coffee from the restaurant, where the playlist had been corrected over the weekend, and where the wobble in Table 14's leg had been fixed by a maintenance tech named Darnell, who had also fixed 7 other things Ellison Webb hadn't mentioned but had written down. Renata came through the lobby on her way to the start of her shift and stopped when she saw him. She had obviously read the email. Her expression cycled through several things in about 3 seconds. "Mr. Webb," she said. "Renata." He nodded. She seemed like she wanted to say something. Then she said, "The trout. You had the trout. Best thing on the menu," he said. She looked like she might say more, but she just nodded and walked toward the restaurant, her shoulders slightly different than they'd been a moment before. Straighter, maybe, or just more settled, the way a person's body changes when they've understood something they weren't sure about. Ellison Webb drank his coffee. The lobby of the Hargrove Grand moved around him. Guests and carts and morning light coming through the tall windows and the fresh lilies on the concierge desk that someone had replaced while he wasn't looking. He had work to do, a lot of it. The boiler room and the HR documentation and 30 days of transition and a chef in the kitchen who didn't know yet that his James Beard aspirations were about to get some real institutional support for the first time in years. There was a lot that needed fixing. There was also a lot worth keeping. Ellison Webb finished his coffee, set the cup on the side table, picked up his envelope, and went to work.